So Mark Goodman is an ASHI certified inspector, entered the profession in 2014. He is a current director of ASHI, the American Society of Home Inspectors. He's also a director of his local chapter, the St. Louis chapter. He owned a successful construction company specializing in general contracting and remodeling for 20 years. He's done marketing and hardware and building materials industry work as well. He's a smart home enthusiast. Mark recently had published in the ASHI Reporter an excellent article. If you haven't read that, go do that. It's a really good article entitled "What You Don't Know About Smart Homes," and the rest is history, or I guess we're making history. So, Mark.
Okay. Well, for some reason, it won't let me turn my camera on, but that's okay. So smart home, practical guide for the home inspector. Yeah. So what is a smart home? Just because you can operate your smart home or your home from a smartphone doesn't mean that it's a smartphone. It's just a connected home. The smart home involves the interconnecting of a wide range of devices that function with the association of the internet, a standalone local control system, a hub, communications protocols, or various other things. Most of us, or some of us, are old enough to remember the Jetsons. In 1962, there was an animated sitcom produced. It was a comical view of the future with their smart home. In 1966, Star Trek came on the scene. There's been many movies and TV shows with smart homes. Some were called smart homes. Probably the most widely known one with the smartest home is Iron Man, where Jarvis literally not only runs the household, but Tony Stark's life. Most of the things in Star Trek have now become reality. So we've been talking about smart homes and technology that people have been dreaming up for years. And now most of it's become reality. And it's become very mainstream. How many connected devices do you have in your home? Normally, if I was operating this in person, doing this in person with interaction, I would ask how many people think 10, 20, 30. But think about it. You have a modem, you have probably a wireless router, you have everybody in your house has a phone, everybody has a computer, everybody has a tablet, you probably have smart TVs that you're streaming things, and that just cracks the surface of what the quantity of connected devices you have in your home. So what's the definition of a smart home? It's really about automation. Smart home term is widely thrown around, but it's really about the process of automation. If you have automation, connected devices, and you automate them, that's really where the smart home comes into has evolved. Although you do have a lot of smart devices that use AI now that are smart home devices on a standalone basis. We all know there's techno jargon in every industry. So here's just a few words that I kind of pulled out. The actuator is a mechanism that's triggered an action typically by a sensor. Automation, that's the holy grail of interconnecting homes. Geofencing, think of geofencing as an invisible perimeter around your home. And you can use that, your phone and geofencing, to trigger certain actions. A hub, wireless hub, is the most efficient way to manage a smart home. So you can have an army of devices connected without having an army of apps on your cell phone. Otherwise, without a standardized system, you're going to end up with 10, 15, 20 apps. So a hub is efficient for that. Everybody's heard the term if this, then that. That's really just a simple interface. If you think of programming, if this occurs, then this happens. And then if that happens, then this happens. And then if this happens, then that happens. The Internet of Things, that's a term that's increasingly given to a number of interconnected devices that are able to communicate with each other and with the World Wide Web. And the protocol, that's really the communication protocol. So if you think of that as the language the devices are using to communicate each other, Bluetooth, LE, Wi-Fi, Z-Wave, Zigbee, those are some common protocols. So why are we discussing smart homes? Well, the technology has become so connected and so mainstream that it's no longer for geeks. It used to be you had to hardwire everything and literally run thousands of feet of wire to make things work and no programming. And now you can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you can pick up smart devices in 1,000 different flavors and bring them home and hook them up into your house. So almost 37% of households in the United States owned a smart home device in 2020. According to the Leviton marketing person for smart home devices, based upon their studies, the average home in the US has a minimum of 4 smart devices outside of thermostats, computers, tablets, phones, security systems, cameras. It's become a huge business. It's $47 billion by 2025. That equates to 77 million smart homes. And a number of these AI-centric houses globally has surpassed 375 million by 2024. In fact, the HBA, at least here in St. Louis, says that by 2026, new homes will come with built-in voice and access controls and smart home devices. So it's increasingly more important that we learn about these devices. This was just another more recent data. They forecasted in 2021, $99.441 billion US dollars as the worldwide market. And the number of homes worldwide is 258 million. So that's with a 12.2 penetration rate. So you can see it's become very mainstream and accessible to almost anyone. So any home can become a smart home, whether it's a 15th century home, turn of the century, 19th century row house or Victorian home, mid-century home, or a modern day home. Any of these homes now can become a smart home, whereas it used to be, if you weren't building it in from the start, it was the cost prevented it from really happening. So are we inspected? Are we required to inspect smart homes? The simple answer is no, but that's going to change with the advent of all these devices being brought into the home. We're typically not required to inspect low voltage systems, speakers, intercoms, security systems, automated programmable control systems, remote controls, sensors, smart home devices, home automation based upon our SOP. Now that rule may vary from state to state, depending upon if you're in a licensed state, and that will change. And in fact, the ASHI SOP says all of those things that I just told you. So if you read this here, this is what the SOP says, but it doesn't directly say smart homes. Now, I will say the InterNACHI SOP does exclude smart homes, and some state SOPs do. But currently, our current standard of practice does not specifically spell out you don't have to inspect smart homes, but really it falls into all these categories that we don't. So automation equals a smart home, as I said. Without an automation, you have a dumb home with a house full of smart and connected devices. So think about this. A realtor is advertising a home as a smart home. Okay? So, but what's controlling that smart home and controls the automation is something like, let's say, your Amazon Alexa. All the programming is tied to your Amazon account or your Apple account or a hub that you're taking with you. If that's taken away, you have a house full of smart devices, but the people are actually purchasing a dumb home. And it may be very difficult and very costly to put it back together. So here I would normally ask for people's examples of what their ideas of automation would be. But think about in a bathroom. Okay, you walk into the bathroom, the light comes on. If it's after dark, the light comes on at 10% in the middle of the night, so you're not blinded by the bright light. If the humidity in the bathroom rises above 50% or whatever you set it to, the fan automatically turns on. If there's a bad odor, the fan turns on. And you walk out of the bathroom and the fan turns off. You could even set it to, if you had a smart mirror, you walk in at 6 o'clock in the morning, the news and the weather comes up on your smart mirror, the shower turns on at the temperature setting you like. So really, yes, that is lazy, folks, but that's the real world in terms of automation. It's the kids' bedtime. The shades close, the bedroom lights go off, the sound machine comes on, the hall light dims to 10%. If the door is closed and the kids get up and they turn the lights on and open the door, the Alexa says to them, "What are you doing? Go back to bed." And you get a notification on your phone. Your teenage daughter or son opens the window, you get a notification. Automation is amazing. In a garage, you pull into the garage, it knows your phone is there, so it turns the alarm off, unlocks the door to the house, turns the kitchen lights on, and the music starts playing. Or it's movie night, and you say, "Alexa, TV night," and the audio equipment turns on, the TV turns on, the shades close, the light dims, and the popcorn machine turns on. This is all automation, and this is all real world stuff that's very easy to do today. But we're never going to be able to tell if there's automation unless they have signs there that tell you to say, "Hey, Google, turn on lights." And we're never going to be able to test automation. So that's one aspect of smart homes that we could never test. So smart home components, what makes it up? Well, you need the modem because you need a gateway to the internet. You need a Wi-Fi router. A smart home gateway or hub, depending upon what devices you're using. Without that hub, if you're buying a Wi-Fi switch that's a Leviton, you're going to have the Leviton app. And then you're buying a Ring device and you're going to have a Ring app. And then you're buying something else and you're going to have another app. That's why the hub is important. Voice assistants, smart and connected devices, apps to control these devices, possibly even control panel or dashboards. All of these are components of the smart home. So you have digital interfacing, the smart devices, a myriad of smart devices like we talked about so far, and we'll get more in depth in that in a few minutes. The communication protocols is the key to how the home functions. And if you are planning to build a smart home, it's really important that you figure out what you want to do ahead of time so you can try to keep everything on the same communication protocol to minimize your apps. Right now, there's a war of communication protocols, kind of like VHS versus beta, but that's rapidly coming to an end due to some innovative solutions. And I think everything else we talked about here, other than rules and scenes, the rules, scenes, routines, that's the key to automations. So you can create rules or routines, and that's what drives your automations. So the heart of a smart home, the inner workings of the smart home can be approached in different ways, from smart speakers, voice controls, Wi-Fi devices, to a myriad of devices that are controlled by a myriad of ways or apps. The smart home, we talked about that briefly. That's the smartest way to control a home. And then there's a few brands that set themselves apart with full automation systems, and they tend to be very high-end solutions. Control4, Creston, Savant, there's a few others, but these are the systems that you generally see a rack full of equipment, everything from amplifiers to lighting controls, all sorts of things. It looks like you're walking into a business basically with a rack of equipment. But those tend to be the really high-end proprietary systems. So does a smart home have a hub? Well, you're probably not going to figure that out. It'd be good if you could, but there's so many different hubs and devices, and they all look different. Unless somebody tells you, you're not going to know. But the advantage of the hub, again, is that the hub is going to determine the protocols. So you, instead of, again, having that single device with that single app, if you get a hub that will communicate with multiple protocols, that helps eliminate the multiple apps. A little bit about communication protocols. It's really the automation protocol. So for a virtual home, because the devices can't talk to each other unless they use the same language. There's about 10 that are universally accepted, widely accepted. Some common examples of the earlier wired protocols would be X10, UPB, a few others. But most everything has gone to wireless, including Z-Wave, Zigbee, Wi-Fi, and there's many others, but those are really the two most popular outside of Wi-Fi. And then you're controlling the home again via apps or control panels or dashboard, hardware devices, switches, dimmers, sensors, outlets, and automation. So you're using the hub to communicate via communication protocol or language to your control device. And you may even find control devices like a dashboard that's built into a alarm panel now. Most of the alarm companies have gone into the smart market also. So different devices. Well, the smart speakers, they're pretty easy to know. The Google Homes, the Amazons, the Surreys, the Cortanas, the Josh, the voice assistants, the internet-enabled speakers that uses AI to relay information, to control devices so that you can use rules to control any device in the house. That's pretty plain and simple. We all see them around. It's something we would never inspect or never test. I did inspect a house a few weeks ago. It was new construction, and in every room, they had a Google Voice, and they had a little sign that said, say this, say turn on lights, say turn on music. There was a list of things for every room. So that obviously the clients were playing around with it, but it wasn't something that I was going to really test out. Smart switches and dimmers. They're so numerous in designs and styles. It used to be they were easy to tell because that most of them would have a little blue light. They'd have an insignia on it or a logo for the communication protocol. It might even say smart. But Leviton is no longer putting any of that on their switches because the consumers didn't like it. So it's going to become harder and harder to see them and determine these devices. And a lot of these switches, you can get these smart switches anywhere from about $15 to $50. Some of these switches will work as a standard switch, a three-way switch, a four-way switch. Most smart switches require a neutral wire. There are a few that you can wire without a neutral wire, but almost everyone requires a neutral wire. So if there isn't a neutral in the switch box, that becomes problematic. But they come in a myriad of styles and designs. Look for a blue light. Sometimes a blue or a green light is a good indicator that it's a smart device. Sometimes it isn't. If there's a delay, when you flip that switch and there's a delay, it's probably a smart device because it's communicating with something else before it's turning that light on. And if you hear what sounds like a relay, a mechanical sound, a lot of those most of those are smart switches. But they have micro switches too, which you can tuck in. It's like a little relay you can actually tuck in to an electrical box behind a switch, behind an outlet, behind a light fixture. So there may be a smart device there that you don't even know. There's two primary forms, wired and wireless. There's some that fit over traditional switches. There are some that they have a remote and you stick it to the wall with a piece of Velcro and put a plate around it, and it looks like a switch. So if you buy, for example, the Lutron switch, that it's a funny looking switch, but all you need is one switch, and then you can put a remote any place you want. So if you didn't have a three-way switch at a staircase before, it's a really inexpensive way of doing it. But it's battery operated. So if it stops working, if you don't know it's a remote and you go to test it and it doesn't work, it could be a dead battery. And then the dimmers that work just like regular switches. There are some of these smart switches. Innovelli makes one that is a regular switch or a dimmer, and it can control up to 49 scenes. The little LED at the side of it, you can use for notifications. So you can put one of these switches by your front door, and if your alarm's on, it could have a red LED. If your garage door is open, it could be orange or any color you want. And if no LED is lit, then it works just like a normal switch. So it's amazing what you can do with these, but there are some very, very smart switches that do a myriad of things that a normal switch wouldn't do. Smart outlets, these are pretty basic. With the exception of the ones built in, you're never even going to pay attention to them. Some of them plug into a normal outlet. There's strip outlets. And then there's a couple smart outlets. Most of them will have a button. So if you look at these, one of them almost looks like a GFCI, except for it only has one button in the center of it. That's a smart switch, and it's only controlling that button. You can control 1/2 of the outlet with that. So 1/2 is always live, or you can control it from an app. Thermostats, somebody put a comment in there about HVAC. Well, the environmental controls on these thermostats, some of them are just basic smart thermostats that you can control from an app, programmable. Then you have other ones like Nest, which are habit forming. They came on the scene in 2011. That uses Wi-Fi. I know I've walked into houses before and the thermostat's been locked, and I had to have the agent call the listing agent and call the homeowners to unlock it so we could test the air conditioning and furnace. In fact, one time I was doing an inspection and I turned the thermostat up so the heat would come on. And I went down to the basement. It didn't come on. I come back on upstairs. It's back where I set it. I went through this 3 times, and finally on the 3rd time I stood there, and within a minute of me changing the temperature, it went back. The homeowner was getting a notification on their app and changing the temperature back. So we had to call the homeowner and tell him to keep his grimy mitts off so we could test the heating and cooling. This is real world situations. And then you have even smarter thermostats than the Nest. Now that's a habit learning one. So if you're the type of person that's constantly fiddling with the thermostat, that doesn't really do you any good. But it learns your habits, so it knows when to turn it on, when not to turn it on. The ecobee uses motion sensors so that if it knows if somebody's in a room, and this is another way. So if somebody's actively there, it'll come on, even if it's outside of the programmable, your programmable settings. If you don't come home, it won't turn it on. And then it has an eco mode that if you sign up for an energy saving program, that it'll automatically adjust your temperature based upon peak usage. Now, we all probably just heard about what happened in a couple states where there were people that signed up for these community energy programs and opted into them. They couldn't touch their thermostats. The municipality and the utility company locked them out from changing the temperature because they signed up, they opted into these energy savings plans. So now we have smart technology that people from the outside are also able to control. Water shutoff valves. I don't know if anybody's run across any of these, but there's a bunch of different ones. So the Moen main water shutoff valve you put in, instead of as it replaces your main water shutoff valve, you You can manually turn the water off. You can turn the water off from an app. It monitors flow. So if it thinks that there's a leak, it'll turn the water off for you. There are other ones that are add-ons. So like in the upper left-hand corner, that's an add-on device called Dome. If you have a ball valve, that's just a couple hose clamps, and that clamps to your pipe, and you can control that to turn your water on and off from an app. And then there are other flow ones, and then there are also ones for laundry areas. So if it thinks that you've got a leak, it'll shut the valve off. Some of them have a plug-in sensor that you can put in the pan, the safety pan, or on the floor. And if it gets a tiny drop of water on it, it shuts the water off. So designed to prevent major damage if you have a leak, if you have a hose burst. Access control. Door locks, garage doors. Most of the newer garage doors have a MyIQ or some type of remote control ability. You know, it's great for automation. If you leave the house in the morning and you're halfway to your inspection and you're wondering, did I close the garage door? You can check it. If you didn't, you can close it. There's a delivery or somebody's coming to your house, you can simply let them in, open the garage, close the garage. The locks, a lot of these keypad locks are not smart devices. Some are, but there's not really, I haven't really found a good way to tell if they're smart devices or not, unless you just happen to know that this particular one is. But they work on different communication protocols. Again, you can control them from an app or a routine. So if you have a good night routine, and when you tell your smart speaker good night, it locks all the doors, sets the alarms, turns all the lights off. All that is really possible and common day. So electrical panels and energy management. According to the UL rating on panels, there's not supposed to be anything put inside of a panel that's not designed to be there. So if it's a Siemens box and if it's not approved to be installed in a Siemens panel based upon their UL rating, technically it shouldn't go in there. But then you have these add-on devices like the two you see on the right side of your screen. And these are energy monitoring. So they have loops on it, and you put it around either just the main leads or you put it around each one of them, and you use that to monitor energy. Those are UL approved to go into a panel, but would you call it out? Would you not call it out? It's technically, the panel's technically not UL approved. And then you have smart panels. Now, we haven't seen many of these in St. Louis yet. I don't know if anybody's seen them, but there are a few companies that are doing them now. Most of the smart panels, with the exception of one brand, if you're using a smart circuit breaker, it takes 2 spaces. So it's like you have a 240 volt circuit breaker there using 2 spaces, but it's really only for 1 circuit. That's going to become problematic if you use those, because it's going to rapidly fill up a box. And then there's the Leviton panels, and those breakers only use 1 space. And it's a universal plug on. So if you've got a newer style panel with the built-in neutrals, and it takes a universal plug on, that will fit in any breaker panel that has that. Most of the circuit breakers that we use are thermomagnetic circuit breakers. The Leviton circuit breakers are hydraulic magnetic. They were making circuit breakers in both thermal and hydraulic that were not smart circuit breakers, but they're discontinuing all the hydraulics other than the smart breakers because of the cost, and they just didn't take off because of the cost. But for some reason, the hydraulic breaker is required for their smart technology. You have surge protective circuit breakers. We've probably all seen them. And I don't know how many people know this, but in 2020, National Electrical Code, they now require that all services supplying dwelling units be provided with a surge protective device, whole house, that's an integral part of the equipment located in the panel or immediately adjacent to it, that's a type 1 or type 2. So if somebody replaces a panel box and you're on 2020 code, you should start to see more whole house surge suppressors. And there's no way we can test those. They have a limited life expectancy. They can only take so many hits. And on surge suppression, really the best way of what people should do is the best form of surge suppression is have type 1, which is at the meter base. It's a ring that plugs into the meter socket, and then your meter plugs into that. I've never seen one out in the field. Type 2 is the breaker that gets installed in your main panel or the add-on device. And then type 3 is the surge suppressor at your computer, your power strip. They say that to do effective surge suppression, you should use all 3 types. So type 1, type 2, and type 3, or type 2 and type 3. The smart circuit breakers come in 1 and 2 pole varieties. They're available on AFCI, GFCI, AFCI/GFCI, and GFPE, which is has a new type of protection in it that it's looking for other things to cause it to trip than normal loads. The smart circuit breakers allow remote energy management, control, and monitoring.
Ready.
All of the Leviton smart circuit breakers are, as I said, hydraulic, and they integrate with the Leviton app. And so if you have a smart circuit breaker, you can turn it on, you can turn it off remotely from the app. If it trips, you can reset it. Most of them will only let you reset it once on a trip, because if it trips again, they want you to actually investigate what caused the trip, as opposed to somebody just keep hitting it and then they have a fire. And the smart circuit breakers also can help with energy consumption. It monitors it. It can tell you a lot about energy consumption that's going on within your house, within your solar system, whatever you want to monitor. And this is a little video that I thought I'd include that Leviton puts out. It's about a minute long, so I'm going to go ahead and play this for you now. Can you hear the audio?
No.
Okay. Let me try this. Let's try it one more time.
From mild to severe. And each year in the United States, tens of thousands of people are shocked
Now we
or
do.
electrocuted. The work you perform can affect your clients for years to come. Trust Leviton GFCI and AFCI GFCI breakers to protect them from the dangers of electric shock. Leviton GFCI and AFCI GFCI breakers stand alone as the only ones on the market today to meet the UL certification requirement of locking users out if ground fault protection is lost due to solenoid switching semiconductor failure. Other brands can reset after losing this protection, exposing your clients and potentially risking their lives. So choose a product that doesn't fall short when it comes to safety. Choose the brand that puts safety first. Leviton.
Window treatments. You can have motorized windows, automated. We've all seen them. There's really not a whole lot to say about these. If there's a remote there, I generally test them. If there isn't a remote there, I just say I don't. How are we doing on time, Hollis?
Mark, it doesn't look like Mike's showing up here. Maybe he didn't get the memo
Other
on the change of
devices?
weeks. So don't feel the need to hurry.
Gates, fireplaces, smart fireplaces, the speakers we talked about, but you can have speakers that are pretty much hidden anywhere. They make these panels now that you actually install flush with drywall. You tape it, you paint over it, and you don't know there's a speaker there. So it's not like when we'd see the speaker grill there and we call it out and say that we just can't test it. If you even comment about it, I generally put a comment in there that says we don't include any of these devices. If I see them, but if I don't see them, we can't comment on it. Sensors, a lot of them, it could be anything from a sensor like what you see on an alarm to a sensor that is sensing motion, vibration, sound, temperature, humidity, light levels, leak sensors, smoke and carbon monoxide, air quality. And some of these are all built into one sensor. It looks like a little motion sensor, but it's a multi-sensor.
Mark, did you hear my answer a minute ago?
Pardon?
Did you hear my answer a minute ago?
I did not.
Yeah, I can't raise Mike, so don't feel like you're in any hurry to finish up here.
Okay.
I think you got an extra 15 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, keep going. Carry on.
Okay, thanks. Security systems, Ring doorbells, cameras, sensors, audible alarms. You really need to think about when you see cameras, listening devices, about what you say. If I see cameras, I tell my clients, I used to try to be discreet about it. I don't really care anymore because they've just become so obtrusive. I tell my clients we won't have a conversation within earshot of any camera or listening device. So we may not be able to talk inside the house. We may not be able to talk outside the house. We may have to walk down the street or do it over the phone. I did an inspection about a year ago, and I was talking to the people at the sidewalk by the street, and somebody came over the Ring doorbell and says, "Could you speak up? I can only hear part of what you're saying." So think about that. You're having a conversation outside and somebody's listening in. It puts your clients at a real disadvantage if the people know what they might ask for before they've even figured it out. So just as general practice, if I see cameras, if I see listening devices, I just generally tell the clients, we won't have a conversation. If they say, no, that's okay, as long as they understand the repercussions. I've heard some realtors say that they've lost deals because they're showing a house and their client comments on how bad the decorating is in the house. And the people are like, I don't care what they offer. I won't sell to them now because they just insulted me. So I think it's something that we should all think about. But it's becoming a real problem. And if you see Nest and Ring smoke detectors, be wary they can listen in too, because you can program them to listen for a specific tone, like your washing machine, so that you get a notification when it stops. Well, if it's listening for that, it can listen for anything. The smart speakers, they're always listening. They say they aren't. They say they only listen for the wake word, but it's always listening. And how do they make them smarter? By analyzing all the conversations they're hearing. So you can actually go on to Amazon and you can delete, if you have an Amazon Echo, you can delete your history. But if you printed out that complete history, it would be pretty scary. So you have RF devices like old-fashioned ceiling fans. And how do you make them smart? Well, there's this little device called Bond that it communicates with your communication protocol for your app or your control center, or whatever you're using to control your smart devices in your house. And then it sends an RF signal to your fans. So you can even take old fans and convert them into smart devices with add-on devices. And I guess really a lot of this we can't identify, and a lot of it, even if we can identify, we're never going to be able to test. We're not going to have passwords. We're not going to have the app. We're not going to be able to test automations. But I really want you to think, to open your mind up and think about how many different things when you walk into that house might be a smart device. And at what point in time is it really going to affect the way we can inspect? I did an inspection and I was told not to touch any light switches because they control every light switch from an app. And if I touched any light switches, it would mess up their app. Well, it shouldn't, because the switch should not have any bearing on the control of the app, no matter what position it is, if they're using a good system. But what do you do in that case? Now you're told, okay, you can't touch any light switch. We need to think about these things, and you need to have some great language for your reports to protect yourself. Home wellness technology is a future aspect of smart homes that's becoming really health focused and starting to become mainstream. They have natural lighting patterns. You can buy lights now, light bulbs or light fixtures that will mimic the natural lighting of the sun so that your body's natural cycles work better. Okay. They have water purifiers that will tell you, we've all seen the water purifiers, the normal ones, the water softeners, but now some of these new smart water purifiers will notify you when you have contaminated water, when you need to change the filter. It's amazing what some of this stuff can do. Air quality sensors. The average person spends 90% of their time indoors. And we all know air quality has become a big issue with the tighter homes we build. Fresh air turnover has become a thing. There are some areas where it's actually in the codes now that you have to have fresh air turnover in residential houses like you have in commercial buildings. UV disinfectant lights can do everything from being installed in your HVAC equipment to literally scrubbing your countertops and door handles or your cell phone. Infrared sensors. These are becoming really popular with businesses, and now they're making them for homes. So when you have a shift change in a factory, everybody's scanned for their temperature. They take a picture, they scan of the person use facial recognition, take their temperature, and if they have a temperature above a certain degree, they're pulled aside and they have to go back home. This became really popular because of COVID. And then if you have a senior citizen parent that's not really good at taking their pills, you can even get smart pill dispensers. So the smart homes have really gone way beyond what we would have imagined when Star Trek was out. Robots, they're not very mainstream. They're very mainstream in industrial, but now they're starting to become more popular. Amazon has an Astro. You know, they don't really do a whole lot for you at this point in time. There's the robot vacuums, there's robot mops. In Japan, they're working on lifelike robots like Sophia that they're going to sell mainstream and put in people's houses. We talked about cameras and listening devices, video doorbells, the smart speakers, the smart CO detectors. There is just a ton of the smart devices. Control panels, we touched on this already. It's really, a tablet that's mounted to the wall or your cell phone that just has a menu of devices, so you can either control automation or you can turn every light on in your house. You can lock the doors, you can close your garage door, you can turn the ceiling fans on or off, you can shut that Moen water valve off from your smart device. You can look and see what the battery levels in all of your devices that require batteries from. So how secure is the smart home? If you have a standalone proprietary communication, it's fairly secure, but if you're using Wi-Fi, it's pretty important that you have a good security that in your router, a firewall, just like you have virus protection. If you use an alarm company smart home system, they tend to be more secure. If you run into alarm systems, and this really isn't smart home related, but if you run into an alarm system and it's 3 or 4 years old, if it's got a 3G radio in it, it probably will not work for a monitored system later this year when 3G, the final cell company, turns 3G off. And most alarm companies are going to make them, we're not going to upgrade them. They're going to make them buy a new system. So if that really only matters if it's a monitored system, so you have a monitor station monitoring the system, but that's something that people may not realize, that and alarm systems are out of the scope of the inspection. But if you see an older alarm system, I generally mention that because that could add a couple $1,000s of cost that they don't know about. And if a lot of the self-install alarm system, and even some of the big companies, they're not a minimum of 124-bit encrypted, which is the same level of encryption the banks use. And if it's not, it's hackable. So communication protocols, Wi-Fi is the most widely used. Z-Wave and Zigbee, they're more secure. They're mesh networks. So you have multiple switches and it's going to bounce from one to another because the range isn't really wide. So if you take for example, a Yale or a Kwikset smart lock, you can't program it and go through the discover process unless you're within a few feet of the hub, unless you have an extender right near it. So what it's doing is you're bouncing off of one thing to improve your signal quality. Z-Wave is a shorter range, Zigbee is a longer range. And for the first time, the smart home industry is on the path of becoming more smart. A bunch of the companies have gotten together, Google, Amazon, Zigbee, Z-Wave, a bunch of the companies have gotten together to create a new communication called Matter. And they're pretty close to rolling it out. It's supposed to be rolled out early next year. And so now you're going to have one universal protocol that will work for everything, kind of eliminating that war of the protocols. You're still going to have some proprietary brands like InstaOn and Lutron and Control4. Those are still going to be proprietary, but that will help a lot when it comes to smart devices. And this is what I was just talking about. It's supposed to be launched in the fall of this year, version 1. So security risk on a smart home. When it comes to privacy, there's a lot to consider. The main big concern is about data sharing, people listening in, people being able to control things remotely. I think we all remember a few years ago when there was a camera company that got hacked and people were able to access cameras inside of people's houses for nefarious reasons. And the companies want the data. It's no different than the companies that are buying up the report writers and the other inspection services that are after our data. It's the same thing. So talking points to clients. The big thing is, like I said before, if somebody takes the brains, they may not be able to utilize the aspects. So what I really suggest is providing a list of questions, or recommending a smart home consulting company review the equipment prior to the seller vacating the home, prior to the end of the inspection period. But if you provide them with a list of questions to ask, they will be better prepared. So what devices are in the home? Where are they? Do they have, a comprehensive list? Do they know what communication protocols they work on? Does it work on a hub or hubs? Do any of the smart devices require a monthly fee? Do they need a passcode to reprogram or to factory reset them? If you have a door lock and you don't have that master programming code, you can't reprogram that touch key door lock. Now, a lot of them will put a sticker with the master programming code on the back side of the lock if you take it off the door. But if they don't provide it to you, and it's not there, somebody's going to have to buy a new front door lock. Are the devices wired or hardwired? So these are some questions that I recommend you provide as a list to your clients. I would even go so far as put them in my report. You may come up with your own set of questions. Take a picture of this if you want to use it. If you want, you can email me later and I'll send you the list of questions. And then you need a really good disclaimer. So we all have a slew of disclaimers that we use for everything under the sun. This is one that you can use. You can tweak it. You can write your own. But this is one that I use. Smart and connected devices are not included as part of our inspection. These systems may include, but not limited to, access control, audio system and controls, specialized lighting controls and outlets, security systems, cameras, home automation, smart connected devices. These systems may cease to function if some equipment is removed. And without detailed information about the smart and connected devices throughout the home, We recommend review of these systems by a contractor specializing in smart home and automation. So this is just one thing. You can come up with your own language, but you really need a good disclaimer. I would add that I like to use the term may include but not limited to. You can use that in a lot of your comments, and that will cover you if you don't list everything. So say you're inspecting a deck and there's 5 items there, but there's a 6th or a 7th item that you didn't think is a big deal to mention, or there's something you miss. If you use may include but not limited to, you're covered. So that's some good CYA language you can use in any comment.
Hey, Mark, can you just go back to the list of questions? I think somebody wanted to get a screenshot of that. I think you there.
Sure,
Um,
that's okay.
First question, where are the flying cars?
Where are the flying cars? There actually is a company in Germany that came out with one last year. You have to have a pilot's license, but it has fold-up wings.
And you thought you'd been a smart aleck.
I was trying. What are some of the major manufacturers of some of the hubs and that kind of thing? Who do you think is coming out on top?
Leviton, Lutron, GE, in terms of switches, are probably the biggest manufacturers. But there are a ton of manufacturers, and if you Google best smart switch, for example, you'll get brands you've never heard of, little bitty tiny companies. This company called Innovelli, they make the best switch, smartest switch out there. There's some switches that are glass panels, literally a glass front. In terms of circuit breakers, electrical panels, I think Leviton isn't really well known for making panel boxes. We're all used to seeing them for switches, outlets, light fixtures, things like that. I think of the smart panels, they're the clear leader right now, but I got to imagine that Schneider Electric is going to catch up pretty quick on that.
Yeah, they're a big player. How much does a smart home cost, maybe in comparison to a regular home of similar size, etc.?
So if you put a normal toggle style light switch in, you can buy it for what, $1 or $2? The cheapest smart switch is probably about $15, and you can spend up to about $45 or $50. But if you're looking at a Lutron Maestro dimmer, you know, the touch dimmer, you can buy a smart switch for half the price of that switch, of that dimmer. So it really depends upon what you're talking about. But if you were wanting to you know, fit all the light switches in your house, and you had 20 light switches, and you did a medium range switch, it would be, let's see, let's say you had 24 light switches and you were going with a $30 switch, $750 for light switches. Most people aren't doing smart outlets. If you're doing a smart outlet, you're really doing it for a table lamp or something like that. The cameras, that can get pretty pricey. The sensors, you can buy sensors for a couple bucks, or you can buy a sensor for $40. It just depends upon what you want to use it for. The smart hubs range from about $40 to about $100. So if you really wanted, you could probably, for under $1,000, do some really serious smart technology in your house without going crazy, and do a ton of automation. Now, if you're talking about windows treatments, we all know the ridiculous price of window treatments already, and figure a roller shade that's a smart roller plate shade, it's probably going to be double or triple the price. And if you're looking at the big Control 4, Savient, Creston systems, you're talking about $20,000 or more.
So a bunch.
Exactly. It just depends upon what you want to do. A lot of people start out with 1 or 2 switches and gradually build.
Yeah, I have a smart switch for my garden. I've got a robot vacuum cleaner. I can't remember. I think there's another thing that I have.
I bought a smart, instead of buying a hose timer, a normal one, I bought one that for the same price, that was a smart one that I can control from an app.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are there any resources that you recommend for further smart home education and keeping up with trends, etc.?
I didn't really find much in terms of resources. There's some really good people on YouTube to follow. I am working with ASHI so that we can develop a smart home class that they'll constantly be updating. I'd like to see a digital badge associated with it. But yeah, it's really tough. Now, Leviton, they will come to any chapter and speak. They're now a national affiliate of ASHI's, but that would probably be a good resource if you wanted to bring somebody to your chapter. I'd be happy to come, but Leviton's going to walk in with their panels and all their, technology, and they're going to be probably more up on cutting edge, but they're also probably going to be more limited to their own line. In fact, I did ask Leviton to send me a panel box and some circuit breakers and some stuff that I can use as samples to pass around so home inspectors can put their hands on it when I'm doing this class in live. They said they were going to send me some stuff, so we'll see. I doubt if they're going to send me a panel because those panels are pretty pricey. Other questions?
How can you expand on the Matter? How's Matter going to work?
Well, it's a new protocol. It's supposed to be backward compatible. So if you're using one of the more popular protocols, it should still work. But instead of having all of these different protocols, there's basically going to be one universal protocol that's called Matter. So right now, the problem is if you buy a Lutron device, they have a proprietary protocol. So you have to have a Lutron hub. You buy something else and it's got a different protocol. And if you don't plan out your system really well, and you have 3 or 4 different protocols, you end up with multiple hubs or all these apps to operate it. Whereas if you buy a SmartThings or a Habitat hub, it'll have multiple protocols built into it. So Wi-Fi, Zigbee, and Z-Wave, and that can communicate with any of those. Now imagine if you have one that's called Matter that will communicate with the more popular ones backwards and any new devices built on that. And that's the theory. So it's only going to communicate with the more popular ones, but it's going to be built into all the Amazon products, Apple products, Google products. So it's going to create a standard, basically, as opposed to, when we had Blu-ray versus, I can't remember the name of the other one, or VHS versus Beta, and one wins over the other. This, they say, is going to make a win for everybody, except for the little fringe protocols that aren't really widely used.
Bruce had a good idea. We should have Leviton come to IW, set up a booth if they've got all that stuff. It'd be pretty interesting for the inspectors.
Well, Leviton will be at IW, and I believe they're actually teaching a class there.
Awesome. See, there you go, Bruce. Ask.
So one of the things that we're doing this year at IW is we actually have a manufacturer track. So we're bringing people, and I don't have the speaker list in front of me, so I'm not going to quote specific names. I know Leviton's going to be there, but we could bring in speakers like Weyerhaeuser and Leviton, James Hardy, people that are the manufacturers, and these manufacturers are a great resource for chapters, for speakers. They love to come speak for free. They have a ton of education in the can that they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars putting together so that they can educate the salespeople, the installer, and the technicians that are doing repairs. And they're happy to. 4 or 5 years ago, I called the Omega Flex rep in St. Louis, and I asked him if they would come speak at one of our monthly meetings when the whole CSST bonding was a big deal. And he's like, sure. So he came in to do a 1-hour talk on a weeknight meeting. Okay. They flew their chief engineer in from Philadelphia and didn't charge us a dime. We did a field trip out to a Certainty roofing manufacturing plant that's about an hour away from St. Louis, where they make architectural shingles. We went out there. We got to pick up several educational topics. They did their education. They fed us, and then we did a plant tour. They didn't charge us a dime. They love to speak to home inspectors.
You should have charged the Omega Flex people. They they wanted access to you.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a great resource that unfortunately a lot of chapters don't think about. But these manufacturers, we had State Water Heaters come to one of our seminars. We've brought other manufacturers in, Simpson, Strong Tie. There's just a ton of them that can provide great education and is more up on the cutting edge and some of the code stuff than any of us are. So it's something to think about for your chapter leaders for future education as possibilities.